Call to order this regular Board of Directors meeting for the pre-agenda for November 29th, 2023. I'm not sure where we're at. Roll call.
Carroll.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Rissler.
Here.
Hunt. Wiles.
Here.
Smiley.
Here.
Blair.
Here.
Thank you, directors. Thank everyone for being here. And at this time, I will turn the floor over to our administrator, Mr. Gilbert.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Hunt let me know she's running a few minutes behind, but she will be coming in.
Okay.
Thank you for everyone being here. We'll start going over the agenda, but also like to thank the Secretary of Energy and Environment from Oklahoma, Ken McQueen, was kind enough to come in to be involved in our discussion in case we have that today. Or when we have our discussion, he'll be available for questions. But starting out with the agenda, letter A, B, C, D, and E of the consent agenda. Is there anything the board would like to discuss?
E.
Letter E?
Yeah,
Chris?
letter E. And we start.
Yeah.
So, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I've already gotten calls from citizens regarding this. Some questions were, has staff done any of the legwork to start with to survey?
And I apologize, Director. I looked at Chris. That's not Chris. That will be Travis and Jason. I apologize for that if you want to come up and speak on it. When you said it, I looked up and saw contracts, so I apologize for that.
Has staff done any legwork on any of this that's listed in the feasibility study? Like, I mean, one citizen said, isn't there a communications person? They could be out there doing surveys, talking to people in the community.
Yes, and so to answer your question, it's been done in several different ways. So part of it is through the, sorry, just a second, I'm gonna pull everything up here. So a lot of that was done through the comprehensive plan. And so we're at a point now where we've got the general feedback, and staff will continue to be involved throughout all of the information gathering process. But what happens is if staff kind of goes out and does a lot of it on their own, it may not be in the format that the architect is going to need to, create the really get the information that they're going to need. And so typically what is done is that the firm that's doing the comprehensive planning, doing the work, they want to get the information themselves so that there's not that extra step of staff trying to reinterpret what they've gathered into a form that the architect needs. So we'll be involved throughout, but it tends to kind of muddy the waters if we jump in and do it in our own way, if that makes sense.
Not really. If you're working with an architectural firm, could you not ask them what they want and how they want it done? I'll be frank. This is over $250,000. And from everything I've looked through, and I didn't realize so many citizens pay attention to the agenda. Sorry. I've gotten a lot of negative feedback, like this is not being a good steward of citizen taxpayer dollars. It's government overspending. Why can't staff do the majority of that? The feasibility study, we already know we want a rec center. That's been determined. I think we know we can support one. I haven't seen anything in here that warrants over $250,000. And the feedback I've been getting, is citizens aren't happy with this kind of money.
Sure. I think the easiest thing, Chris, can you pull up the presentation here? Thanks. So
Travis, can you pull that mic closer, please?
Yeah. And I'll start again. Travis Cheney, Parks and Rec Manager. I'll skip through some of this initial stuff, and I'll get to kind of to your question immediately through the scope here. So a lot of those questions are answered in the scope itself. And so a lot of this is specialized work. So I'll start off with the task 1A. So what they'll be doing here is a lot of the market analysis, which is something that's outside of the scope of our department. So what they're going to be doing is there are firms that are specialized in looking at, what is our trade area compared to other areas in the region, in the country. What can this area support? And so they are the firms that really have the knowledge and skill to analyze the market that we have here and try to come up with an answer of, if we build something like this, can we pay for it? Will people come to it? What will people actually spend? The staff can, of course, release some surveys, but a firm that does this as their bread and butter, they're going to be able to provide us a much more accurate picture of what the community can actually support.
So we might pay over $250,000 to be told it's not a good idea?
Well, they can help tell us what sort of programming would make the most sense there. So as I talk to other Parks and Rec directors around the state, they've said that for them, this was the most important thing that they did in their rec center planning, was to have this firm come in and say, hey, if you want to start a rec center, listen, there are 100 things you could have there. You could have an indoor pool. You could have a rock climbing wall. You could have a basketball courts. The options are endless. What they can do is say, hey, typically nationally, if you build, say, a basketball court, here's roughly the ballpark of what you can expect to spend on it. If you structure your operations, your membership in such and such a way, you can expect reasonably to recover those costs over X number of years. If you structure it this way, you can expect to recover your costs over this period of time. So this firm will really help us get an accurate picture of, given our market, given what we gather from community engagement here, what we could reasonably support and not get in the red over the long term. So that's just one component, but that's a pretty big one, is the market research, doing the statistically valid surveys that are going to say, hey, we've done two things. One, we've done these online surveys, which of course anybody in the community can input and say, I'd really love to make sure there's more baseball fields there. And that's great, that's fantastic. But of course with the online surveys that we could do, it's easy for the loudest voice in the room to have the biggest, an oversized influence. When we have a firm like this that does statistically valid surveys, we can feel pretty confident that within a margin of error, plus or minus 3%, we've got a good handle on what the community can really support given national trends. And so they're going to be able to give us a lot more accurate reflection of the kinds of things we could build at a rec center that the community would really support, sort of in a, based on nationally what they see. So that's one small part of it. The other part will be, looking at our existing facilities. So they'll be coming in, looking at our aquatic center. They'll be looking at Bob Henry Park. They'll be looking at soccer complex, and they'll be looking at Butts Athletic Fields and Lazy Boy. And so they're going to be bringing that kind of architectural experience, saying, hey, you may have this community feedback that you want an indoor pool at the new rec center, looking at national costs, looking at what your budget might be. We would be able to say, you might be able to expand your current facility and, not build one at the new rec center. Again, this is all complete hypothetical, but this is why we're bringing in the experts to be able to look at, analyze what we have existing and be able to provide us a good sense of what makes the most sense for our community and for our budget. So that's a big part of it too, is they're bringing in the architectural experience, the aquatics experts to analyze our aquatics facility that's 30 years old and try to make the best decision on what do we do with that facility? Do we try and upgrade it so it's good for another 30 years? Do we try to pivot over to a new place out at the rec center? So that's stuff that staff isn't really qualified to do.
If I may, Travis.
Sure.
Director, one of the three, again, the feasibility study, not big on studies.
No,
But when-
me either, or
but
the waste of
again-
money.
But again, when we're looking at a $25 to $35 million project, I thought it was very important that we do some kind of study to know where we're at, because it's going to go in, it's basically a master plan. We're trying to get our head around a master plan. I'm not big on bringing a indoor pool to the board right now, but if it's pickleball courts, if it's baseball fields or softball fields, we have to get a study to kind of know what we're looking to build, what kind of money that we are looking at. Because we're looking at, Travis, I'm right, this possibly being a 26 project, because we have a sales tax that's rolling off, and we would have to bring it to the voters in November of 25, if I'm correct. So this was like step one. So when I look, yes, I agree with you, Director, 135,000, a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of building 30 million, I'm trying to give you as much information to make a decision.
228,000, not 135. You're thinking of the tennis courts.
I'm sorry, yep, right below
And
it.
I understand. I'm not against a study. I looked through everything, and a lot of this stuff is stuff staff could do. And so why not do as much groundwork and legwork as possible and then pay somebody for what staff does not have the expertise to do? So, and like I said, I've already gotten feedback from several citizens on it, and these are their suggestions. So,
And again, that's the pleasure of the board to accept it or not accept it.
And it may be helpful, I don't, this of course was a presentation I'd give at the actual board meeting, but it may be helpful for context to just give you all a sense of where we're at currently. A lot of this is coming out of the 2040 comprehensive plan. And these were the parks related goals in that 2040 comprehensive plan. The bottom one there was planning for sports facilities as part of a parks master plan or as an interim measure, looking for something, an indoor recreation or community center. The board took that in 22, put together this board goal that staff has been working on in 2023, which was to gather public input regarding community recreational needs, consult with architects and engineers to develop a concept plan, an estimate cost, develop a funding plan, and then that's all presented to the board. And so what that may look like, and again, this is just a very big picture potential timeline that will be teased out over the course of the next couple of years. So 2023 was just staff developing scope, figuring out what is the information we need, who is going to be best suited to get that information to us as accurately and as professionally as possible. Staff's done that this year. We've made a recommendation of a firm, WER. If we go with WER, then 2024 is going to be, all right, we are digging in and really figuring out, taking it from these very big ideas. We kind of like baseball fields, maybe pickleball, maybe something indoors. That's super high concept. And so it really is the purview of an architect to be able to take, an architecture firm, to be able to take those very high level concepts and start refining them into something that you could actually build. And so, feasibility study may sound a little too soft, but really this is you can't get to construction plans without going through this step first of really figuring out what is it the community can actually support, what is it the community actually wants. And so that'll take a full year. There may be some elements in here that staff can do, and again, staff will be part of it. But as you see, it's a full year project that it's dependent on staff. Is with the other project staff are working on. This is a very specialized thing that is going to potentially cost a lot of money. So our recommendation would be this is where you bring in the professionals to see this across the finish line in as professional, high quality, cost saving measure as possible.
Madam Mayor.
Sorry, go ahead.
I understand that, but things like town hall meetings for the citizens, all of that was in the list. I really don't understand paying another company over $250,000 to do those things. When we get down to the architectural stuff, all of that, absolutely figuring it out. But there's so much in here that I just don't understand. So
Sure.
anyway,
Okay.
I'll let you have the floor.
Kevin, can you give any, just the architecture, just the price and architecture? If we're looking, and again, from the numbers I've looked at, we could look at a $25 to $35 million cost. The architecture work on this alone could be in the millions if we want a park and rec center. So Kevin, if you can address that a little bit.
Yeah, Kevin Moore, city engineer. So essentially, really what we're looking at is a lot of the work on the front end that will inform the architects, because this is out of the architect's scope as well. These feasibility studies are typically done before they come in, so they may be able to tell us the cost to run a 3-story building versus a 2-story building, but they can't tell us these are the things that you can fit in a 2-story building, and these are the things that you'll be limited to no longer be able to do. And so the feasibility study really brings in the knowledge to inform the architects of what will actually be supportable by our community. Things like increased staffing for Parks and Rec, what those needs will be, things like all the dominoes that come from decisions that staff could make, but we may 10 years or 15 years down the line discover that if we had gone a different route, we could save the city a certain amount of money or provide a different service through that interim. So, but we really are, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
But we really are looking at typically 15, almost 20% total design of based on what a project costs. So if we're looking at a $30 million project, then we're easily talking $4.5–5 million in design between civil and architectural.
And so from staff's perspective, this is sort of the national model of how you build these things. And the firm that's doing the architectural design typically is the one who is, they're going around the country doing this all the time, engaging the community. They know the questions to ask. They have the practices in place. They have the expertise and it's planners, it's architects, it's engineers. They have that expertise to get ask the right questions and get the right information, and then turn that information into, conceptual models that connect with the community. And again, staff is involved in that process. It's not like we are, we're there at those meetings. We are there every step of the way. But again, this is a highly specialized area of expertise that staff is of the opinion that the national model is you're bringing in a firm to do this on a building of this scale that we'd be looking at.
Madam Mayor. Oh, yes, Mindy.
So I guess I have a couple of comments. One, for us to expect staff to do this sort of thing. First of all, I understand the concern. It's sort of a sticker shock. Anytime you look at a consultant or a specialist coming in and doing this kind of work, there's sticker shock because it's just expensive. So I do understand the concern. I would really appreciate when other board members get concerns from citizens, if you could encourage those citizens to contact all the board members, because you all hear things that some of us don't always hear. So it would be very helpful. And I suspect that sometimes maybe they're experiencing a little bit of sticker shock too, and don't have the full explanation sometimes. And so maybe if there were a way we could respond with more of a full explanation, whether we do this or not, I'm just saying that I think sometimes the citizens don't have the full picture, and that may make a difference, may not, may make a difference. But I think for us to expect staff to do this when I'm assuming you already have pretty full plates and not maybe the expertise in all the areas where you need expertise, we would have to pull you from something else in order to do this. And I think all those something else's are pretty important, or we would have to hire new staff to help. So it
that
maybe
is part of it as
doesn't
well.
even out, but there would still be a cost of having staff.
Sure, because this is it is a 40-something week project with a pretty large staff of architects, planners, engineers. So, you know, I would imagine that the number of folks working on this project is larger than our staff alone. So it is a pretty big ask, pretty big lift.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Carol.
I would agree. At the scope of what this project entails, I don't think we should expect our staff to do this. I think in the past, when it has been this large, we have looked at other avenues. So I would agree that we need to use and have that feasibility study done.
And it may be helpful, just again, feasibility study may sound to, you know, like there's nothing there, just some recommendations. What this does get us to is an operations pro forma for the recreation center. By that I mean, you know, coming out of this is them giving their best opinion of, given your market trends, what your trade area can support, these are the things that we would recommend putting in a recreation center that would then recover costs. This is how we would recommend structuring your price structure, those sorts of things. It gets us to conceptual drawings of, you know, almost everything in the facility. It gets us to more or less master plans for other existing facilities that would potentially need to be upgraded as a part of this through some sort of bond. So looking at least 4 other large city parks that have, you know, I think 60,000 people a year use the soccer complex, 50,000 a year use the baseball fields. You know, these things that get pretty heavy use, we're going to be able to get to a point where we have a good base to start from, where we feel confident, and this would be a good an avenue to pursue. So it is the market analysis and the research. It's the statistically valid surveys. It's assessing all of our existing facilities, giving us direction for design, particularly on aquatics. And then, yeah, it's doing all that community engagement, which is a lot of work. And then working on, you know, for 22 weeks, the conceptual design, getting you the artistic renderings, going back and confirming what the public heard. So if you can imagine, it'll be sort of like meeting one. The architects are there, they're meeting with the community, they're getting as much feedback as they can. Those same people are then going back, they're working on drawings, they're taking those drawings, bringing them back to a second meeting. This is what we heard, this is the direction we're going, you know, tweaking here and there. That's what this typically looks like.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
this is going to be a very expensive facility. And I think that doing these feasibility studies and these meetings will make sure we get what we want at the best price. And I think it will save us money. What is it, $228,000? I think we will save that in the long run by having that study done.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, David.
Travis, is this price inclusive of all the architectural drawings?
No. So, and I'll go back to this potential timeline. And again, this is all very potential. So this would get us to our program and concept development, you know, get us headed in the right direction and get us conceptual drawings, get us order of magnitude cost estimates. We're then taking that and going into engineering and architectural, which gets you those construction drawings. But this is the step to get you to those construction drawings, which would likely be 2026, depending on if and when an initiative on a ballot passed.
So this is a feasibility study, even though it's by a firm that is considered an architect. They talk about using another architect firm in their letter, being happy to be working with such and such architect.
Yeah, so this is a team, SFS out of Kansas City, and WER, which is based in Fayetteville and Central Arkansas. So these are the 2 architects that would be working on this project, and they both have a long history. Particularly SFS almost exclusively does recreation centers, and these are just a couple of photos of recent ones they've built.
It's a very impressive proposal, and it's obvious their extensive background in this type of stuff. I think it's awfully funny that it's a feasibility study, but it's a consultant. We're hiring another consultant. And under Mr. Patterson, that's all we did. We just kept hiring consultant. Probably spent millions in consultants because we just thought that was the way to go. And we spent $250,000 on the comprehensive plan, which shouldn't have cost more than $100,000, but that thing is where you got the idea this is needed to be done. And I completely agree. We've talked for decades about basically a new community building. That's what the original community building was supposed to be, although it was limited. But that's what we've said for years, is that we need this desperately. However, I think once again, we're hiring consultants. Consultants always tell you what you want to hear. They want to tell you what to do based upon what they know you're wanting to hear, and they always make sure that they keep themselves employed for further. I've seen it and seen it and seen it and seen it, and not only did we spend almost the same amount of money on the comprehensive plan, we spent almost the same amount of money to do the feasibility study for East Main. And I sit back and say, has this board decided to do this project? Because the cart before the horse with East Main was the board had not fully decided to do the project. And so I look back and say, why don't we, I look at who you say, interview the key stakeholders. Why would John Brown University have anything to say about this? They have their own rec department out there. The hospital, I understand, because where you're talking about it going, it's going to be near them. We had talked years ago about going where the rodeo grounds is, because it would work closer to the high school, because that is almost the same amount of land in that area. And that's why I think a different piece of land was bought for the rodeo grounds. But you say interview key stakeholders. I always hear this word stakeholders all the time. The key stakeholders are the citizens of Siloam Springs. And I understand you're going to have these community meetings to gather input, but that's what the comprehensive plan was. And it was the same group of 50 to 60 people showing up at every meeting and voting on what they wanted the city to be moving towards. So I think we already have a lot of the answers from those previous meetings. But my frustration here is that the board has not been kept up to date on this. I was explaining to our administrator after the last meeting that the land where we bought for the rodeo to go has now been decided by city staff to be used for something else. Our board did not decide at any time that I know of to not put the rodeo grounds there. But it seems like these decisions are being made, as Mr. Patterson used to say, at the 35,000-foot level, but without consulting the board that's elected by the people to make those decisions. So we should be included on where all the property is across the city that we could look at doing this, because where you're doing is in the growth of the city, but it is pretty darn far from the rest of the city. It is about as far northeast as you can get, still in civilized city limits. But you've already met with, you've come up with plans. It's similar to the Sager Creek refurbishment plan, where you had already met with the company and determined what we were going to do. And I understand that most staff were, or department heads were, most, not all, but they were trained by our staff that's no longer here. But we can't have any more situations where a proposal is brought to us as a board to vote on as soon as we get it. You got the letter and proposal November 3rd. You should have sent it to this board as soon as you got it. You'd been working on it earlier, I know, but we should have been getting an update that this is gonna be brought. And I'll just say it flat out. I'll just put staff on notice that if you get something, a proposal, if you get an audit, whatever, as soon as you get it, if it's coming to this board, you better send it to this board right away. Because waiting till the last minute before a board meeting, putting it on the agenda, expecting us to vote on it, and it's in the agenda that we're gonna vote, it doesn't work. It may have worked before, but it doesn't work anymore. This board needs better information ahead of time to make decisions. And it's just not very respectful to this board to throw something at us, and within a week to 2 weeks of getting it, we're supposed to vote on it.
If I may, Director, this has been an ongoing discussion with me and every board member sitting in this area. We have talked about the rec center. This is step one.
We've talked about it. We've talked about it.
We have talked about it. If the board does not want to move forward with this, all they gotta do is say they don't want and vote it down. But to say you're not, I have been more than transparent the 4 months that I've been sitting in this chair. And for you to say I haven't, that's not true.
Administrator, we've hardly met, you and I. And whenever we have, and you brought this up, that this is coming up, that is a fact. You said it's something we're going to be discussing how to raise the money for it. But as soon as this got to the city, the first week of November, we should have got it. It would have been easier for us to evaluate, give input on it. It went on this way for a long, long time, and it's just, we need these things. If we're gonna be voting on them, we need them when staff gets them, especially if this is the final proposal. Then what's the holdup to wait until the board packet goes out? I just don't, I think we need to do something, but, it's an awful big decision, because we've all said, I think you said it too, Alan, this could be very high millions of dollars. You told me that, and I get it. I get it.
Again, that's why.
But is this board determining by doing this that this is the next big plan, that this is the next big project we are doing? I think the board has to sit down and once again go over the board goals list, and we need to confirm that everybody's on the same page, because there's still an awful lot of stuff that needs to be done on streets and drainage and so many other things.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm
done.
I'm looking at this memo, and it looks like we set a 2023-24 board goal to develop a plan for the Community Recreation Center, and the 3 bullet points to achieve that goal are gather public input regarding the need, consult with architects, and develop a funding plan. So in my mind, that's what staff is doing.
I'm basing that off the 22-23 goals.
Okay.
And this was the direction when I got into this seat that we wanted to move forward with looking at doing a park and rec center. Kevin, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, Kevin Moore, city engineer. I think part of the discussion and part of something that we need to be careful of is that sending things directly to the board outside of a public setting would open up the possibility for board members to influence staff individually, and that's something that we need to avoid. So I think if we bring a proposal before you that you're not ready to vote on, then I would recommend that you table it to give yourselves time to review it, because staff is only making a recommendation. We can't make any decisions above $54,000 without your support. And so if you're not ready to support this yet, then I would recommend tabling it until you've had a chance to review, or providing staff with a list of questions that maybe we can come prepared for on Tuesday night.
Thank you, Kevin. That's helpful information.
Anyone else?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I feel like I've been informed. I like the direction we're going with it. Travis, you made good presentation, I felt. I like the grasp that you have on it. Yeah, we're talking about a lot of dollars. But, and I understand that 228,000 is not something I can just sit down and write a check out for. But I do think it's something that needs to be done to lay a proper foundation for the building of a rec center. And I thank you, the staff, for what you have done to get us to this point. In the field of work that I do, price point has really gone up. So sticker shock is an everyday thing. But when you have sticker shock, it's not something you just set aside, but it's something you get to work through. And until it rests well with you, I think a little bit of time may be needed. But I think where we're going with this is good, but I'm not wanting to encourage rushing it. But I do think this is a good direction. Thank you.
Alan?
Other questions? We'll move on to ordinances.
Well, I will say, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm not a bit surprised at the sticker shock because of the size that we're expecting the facility to be. But I would much rather put this kind of money into an actual architect. Even if the architect fee is $500,000, $228,000 could go towards that. Because I feel like you're paying a consultant to give you information you already have. You're paying a consultant to say, yeah, I think we should do this. We've already heard that from the comprehensive plan. We've already been told this is where you should be going. And we've all said, yeah, that's something we've talked about for decades. But to get a feasibility study from a consultant that is not going to end up paying for the architectural fees, it's one of those things where you say, for $10, $15 million, should we not be saying before we go down this path, should we be asking for a public vote on the expenditure of this kind of money? It was less than that we went to the public for a vote on the broadband plan, and it didn't go through by a couple hundred votes. We did not go to the public for spending over $7 million on a library. So it's like, I'm for this and I want this. I just want to make sure that it's the next big thing that we need to be taking care of. And I hate that we're spending this kind of money that could be going to an architect.
And Director Allen, if I may clarify, the firms that we would be contracting with, this is an architecture, both of these are architecture firms.
Right.
And so these are architects who will take us to conceptual design. They'll take us to, these operations pro formas. And then, we have it gets us to a very good sense of what this would really cost and what then we need to go to the public to potentially bond for, So
Well,
this
that
is
was part of
to
my
get
question.
us.
Would they give you options on funding? I mean,
And
did they come back and say, this is how you should,
Well, that would
or
most likely.
two or three on what you would do?
I'll lean on Administrator Gilbert for that. I think the ideas for funding would a lot of that be coming from staff. But of course, a lot of these you're going to get different iterations. For X amount, you can get this. For X amount, you can get this. For X amount, you can get this. This is the kind of iterative process of us trying to, as a community, move from a very conceptual idea, which we got in the master plan, which is generally we want something like this. This is the first step in getting us towards construction drawings. And so this really, it's all part of the same process. It's just it's the first step of getting you there, of really understanding what the community wants and what the community can.
It's a very impressive
support.
proposal.
So-
I'm not throwing shade on the proposal. It's very detailed, and they did a great job, and they most certainly have the credentials with all of their previous stuff to be being worked on, that we would know they can definitely do this. My biggest problem is when we get these things in the board packet and see that staff has had it for 2, 3, 4 months, sometimes 6 months, and waited to put it in the board packet till 2 weeks before the meeting, I just don't go for that. And I would like us to be receiving these when staff receives them. Kevin, it's a bit of an insult to hear that you worry that the board could influence staff. I'm talking about the final proposal that you've already gotten, which came to this staff on November 3rd. I'm not talking about when park staff was voting on different companies. I'm talking about the final proposal, the same way the audit was at the last meeting. That's what I'm talking about. The final thing, it doesn't need to be held back until the meeting to be included to the board.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
David, are you finished?
Yeah, thank you.
Travis, one question. Just to keep it simple, say $4 million for the architectural work. Well, let me back up. Are these,
Can you talk into it? Thank
are these
you.
two architects, if the study goes through and completed, they will then be the ones to come up with the drawings?
We would most likely go out, but again, they would be in a very good position to see it over the finish line, as they've got architects, engineers on staff, so to get us to construction drawings.
Okay, because what I was wondering, so it would be a bid process at that point?
Right.
Okay, then that really probably.
Well, it would be the procurement of professional services.
Okay. My question was going to be, if we did this and they started the work, that 4 million, would this be part of that 4 million, or would this be in addition to the 4 million?
This would be
Because everybody wants to move to the architect, and I understand if they got the go-ahead that this would be part of their fee and not an additional fee, that is inclusive in everything that they're going to be doing.
It's not out of the question in certain circumstances. In this circumstance, and I'll go back for clarification from Administrator Gilbert, but in this circumstance, it would be difficult because of our timeline. So the timeline we're considering right now is that we would, after we have a good sense of what it would cost and what the community wants, then we would take that number that we're coming up with. That's what we would then go to the public for a vote on in 2025. Maybe not, start the actual construction drawings. And again, this is all architectural. Again, it's all part of the same process. You can do different things with each stage. I think what most people are referencing are, we want shovel-ready plans. Takes a while to get there. But that process of getting us to, this is where the toilet paper holders are going, this is the size of the mechanical room, that stuff likely wouldn't come until a little further down the line after the ballot initiative passed. And we would hope, and that's the big dollars that you're talking about, the getting into the millions, is getting us to those construction drawings. That, we would hope, would be part of the bond initiative and all come out of that same fund. This would be quality of life funding that we currently have that would get us to a good point where we can get that really big number for the final engineering into the bond initiative.
Thank you.
And if I may, Director, I'm sorry. One of the thoughts when they started running this project through me months ago, I did not want to do a feasibility study. They came back and I learned more about it. I would rather spend $225,000 and be able to bring that to you, and you may say, this is not doable. So it's more, I looked into the project, it's such a process. This is step one, then we have step two, step three. We would still have to take it to the voters to see if we, or or even the board would decide, hey, we want to use that when that tax rolls off, if they want to use that tax and take it to the voters to even use it for this project. I'm just trying to get you a number to even know if this project's doable, because we have so many projects coming up just with our wastewater plant. Our equipment's getting so old, we're looking at probably a $25 million project. Is that, Tony, probably in the next 5 years that has to be done? So there's a lot of projects. So I'm just trying to get you as many numbers as I can where you can make the best decisions for the citizens going forward. Kevin, with that being more of a bid process, the architects, I don't know if we could roll that all into one. Could you give some clarity?
Yes, so I believe the board would set what appears on the ballot for the public vote, and that would be a discussion or a recommendation from you all whether that would include the design or whether we would fund the design prior to a vote for the construction itself. And a portion of that design will be the conceptual drawings that we would be getting with this contract. So regardless of when we do it, a portion of that 228,000 would be out of that 4 or 5 million that we would be looking at later. So I do believe it would, regardless, we'll be paying for that conceptual drawing portion. The advantage is we know about how much it will cost us when we begin looking at setting those things for the ballot for the public's vote instead of guessing.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Lisa.
So if you get those numbers and the public votes it down, what's next?
We would have to find other ways, bond or other ways to pay for it. If that was the will of the board, the pleasure of the board, we'd have to find a way to pay for it.
Do bonds go to the public, or do we vote on bonds?
Yes, it would be a bond vote
That's what
on
I
the
thought.
ballot as a tax increase. And during the background, throughout this process, staff will be looking for grants that would help offset that as well. But as of right now, we're proceeding with the understanding of the full amount, because grants would just be a benefit.
Right.
Madam Mayor, just for clarification, we're for this particular bond, we're not talking about necessarily a tax increase, but continuing
Right.
a
Yeah, I
tax,
knew.
right?
But if it
Okay.
fails at this point, you got to think of the next avenue. And I thought all bonds had to go to the public vote. Well, if they vote this down, what's going to make them vote a bond?
And if they did vote,
I want to make
this
sure we're
down.
representing the citizens, period.
so
Not
the extra tax they're
our
paying
personal
right
opinion.
now, that goes
No, this isn't a new
away.
tax. I know
right?
it's not a new tax.
No,
that we
no,
vote on.
but I just need some clarification sort of on the extra tax they're paying now. That's because what that was going to has been fulfilled. That tax will go away unless we ask for them to renew it for something else, right?
in
Or-
2016, the public voted on a 3/8 cent sales tax. It was 50% capital improvements to utilities, if I'm correct, and 50% quality of life. That sunsets those 10 years. And that itself was an extension of a previous 3/8 cent sales tax.
Okay.
That will sunset, I believe, in July of 2026. So staff's opinion is that our initial best bet to do something of this scale would be before that sales tax sunsets, to go back to the public and say, would you like to continue this existing sales tax for some sort of large parks improvement bond? Now, we would ideally do that in May of 2025, because if it fails then, it gives us a little time to readjust, potentially come back with something smaller, try again in early 26 before it fails, see if there is some appetite for something on a smaller scale. If it fails again, then it's kind of, frankly, back to the drawing board.
Travis
So-
just hit it, directors. The big thing why I was trying to get this done in 25 is take 2 shots at it in case the citizens decide, hey, this is way too big a project. We want it smaller. It would, like Travis said, it would give us a chance to reset, take it back to the voters again in 26, because that would be our last chance to do that.
What numbers are we looking at? If that tax was to drop, what numbers are we looking at?
Christina, I'm putting you on the spot. Can you?
Christina Patricius, Finance Director. I'm just going to say that based on when I looked at this last year, at the rates of the taxes we're at last year, we could just about cover $30 million.
In 1 year? Or,
No.
I'm like.
$30 million
what-
bond.
Oh, to
So-
cover it, okay.
I mean, a $30 million bond, paying the interest and paying the bond off over 20 years.
20 years. Okay, that's what I was looking at, the ROI.
I like the 1 year better.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking,
Now,
somebody's shopping here.
And I will get an answer for you, but I actually believe in the state of Arkansas, revenue bonds do not require a vote. But revenue bonds cannot include tax money. So only tax bonds, I believe, require a vote, but I will confirm that and send you an email.
And this is a tax bond.
Right now, we're talking about getting the voters to approve a tax.
But
The-
if we did a revenue bond, you don't have to because you sell the bond,
Correct.
26.
right?
what was the last revenue bond we did?
Well, I don't,
That was-
oh, yeah, but it's a long time ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we haven't
that's,
done one in a long time.
No, we have not. Mm-mm.
Yeah, don't we have one getting ready to roll off?
Yes, we do. And I believe that was a 20 or 30-year bond, so that was a long time ago.
Right, so I know that's gonna free up, that was several $1 million that we've done, we're getting ready to be free and clear with that pretty soon. I think that was one of my meetings.
And how much is that? What percent?
Pardon?
Paying?
What percentage of the sales tax is about to go off?
Yeah, the revenue bond.
Oh, no, the revenue bonds are not related to sales tax
It's
at
not
all.
part of the tax.
Mm-mm. And it was one that was done in the utility fund for utility upgrades.
Okay. So if this doesn't pass, what percentage would the tax decrease for citizens?
3/8.
3/8, the whole 3/8. So,
You mean in 2026?
In 2026, 3/8 will roll off if we don't utilize that for something else and get the voters
Or
to
if you-
approve it.
It's not necessarily, people call it an extension, but it's not. It's a new tax. If you wanted to go to the public and say, okay, the 3/8 cents is coming off, we are proposing a 5/8 cent. It doesn't have to be 3/8 cent. It could be,
Have to- you
it could
have
be a
to-
quarter cent.
You have to vote on it
Yeah, it has to be voted on.
because it's going, the other that we voted on will roll off. correct?
As it was proposed and promoted in 2016, it's not a new tax, it is a new tax. Because when you have a 10-year sunset tax, the public votes thinking it's gonna go off in 10 years. But when you continue to take it out for another vote, whether it's a different reason or what, it's proposed and promoted, at least the chamber did it in 2016, as, it's not a new tax. Well, it is.
It
It
is.
just has to have the public approve it in a vote.
It's just,
But you can change the rate and you can change the reason,
It goes to a different
yeah,
direction.
which is what happened in 2016, yeah.
yes.
The thing I've not been able to get an answer for umpteen years is the 2016, the part that goes for quality of life, who determines quality of life? I mean, who on staff or board or whatever determines the amount that goes in that fund or the quality of life fund or whatever? Who determines how that money is spent?
You do. The board does.
So
We
my-
if we put it in the budget, we'll identify it as a quality of life, or we will ask you to pull the money out of the quality of life as the board. Mhm. Yes, but the amount is a half of that 3/8 cents tax.
So we determine what is quality of life.
We're
Correct.
supposed to. I've always said quality of life is different to every person.
It is.
But
you
the
would
other
think it-
half went to utility department, right?
Yes, it-
Capital
Yes.
improved, yeah.
Lisa, that answer your question?
And then the 5/8 cent that we has is the one that recently got, like, changed around to where it was part to the safety, I call them the safety department, police and fire.
No,
Oh.
actually, the 5/8 cents is, actually, that is for the water plant renovations.
That's only to the water plant?
That is only for water plant renovations, and hopefully we'll get that paid off in the next 4 or 5 years.
That was the one that was 30 million?
30 million. Mhm.
Lisa?
Is there a way to get a vote from the people on moving forward on a project like this, or no? We have to wait for that ballot issue on the tax? I know streets. I've talked to attorneys down in Little Rock. I know streets. Any of us can say, hey, we want, if we're going to spend so much money on the street, we could say, hey, I want it to go to the vote of the people. And is this one of those projects that qualify to go to the vote of the people before we put any money into it?
Did you say that if we put this on the ballot, it would be free? Is that what you said?
No, I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
I'm
not
sorry.
hearing you.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering if we put we can decide if we want streets on because of projects and citizens' frustration, and citizens have voiced frustrations in previous years, and I think it's been said at these board meetings, so it shouldn't be a surprise to any staff that it's being said. I just want to make sure it's important to me that I represent the citizens, and I love the idea that we're going to have a center, but is this what the citizens want? And that's why I was wondering, is this one of those projects that qualify to go on a ballot, like a street does, or any other project?
Honestly, I
There's a
think you would,
qualification.
I'll be happy, I made a
Yeah.
note, I'll be happy to look into that and talk with our attorneys to see if we can do that, or talk to the right people to see if we can.
Because there's a vote in March, so would it be possible to put it on the ballot in March?
I'll be happy to
Yeah,
look into
I
that.
March of '24? You're saying put this on March of '24?
Can we do that?
Not the tax, if they want to do this project.
Yeah,
If you're going to spend a certain amount of money, there's a qualifier that says what you can put on a ballot and what you can't, like streets.
So you're looking for an up and down or down vote on the
Yeah.
facility itself?
Right. Is this
Whether
the,
the
is this the
citizens want
directions?
that or
Yeah.
not.
Is this the direction the citizens want to go?
I understand.
Before we spend 226, 28, whatever it is.
Right, 225. The issue is, I'm not disagreeing, I'm just, I'm not saying we're in a time crunch, but this is something that I have wrestled with for months to bring to you. Because again, I'm not a feasibility person, but when we're spending this kind of money, I just want to get you all the information possible going forward, because it's kind of a time crunch. Feasibility studies almost takes a year. The architecture is going to take a year. Now
But we're in December.
Before we even get into the end of 25, and then we'll get architecture, then we've got to, the voters got to vote at the end of 25.
In May of 2025.
Correct. So if we put this off to March, we've pretty much lost the whole year in 24.
That's 3 months. I just don't want to take the voice of the people away.
I can get you an answer first. Let me see if it's even doable.
Yeah, because it's important to me that we hear from the citizens.
Madam Mayor?
This is their community.
Okay. Yeah. David?
So Christina, really, you could look at replacing the 3/8 cents or changing the 3/8 cents that's coming up in '26 as a proposal.
yes. And the $30 million number that I said that we could afford with the sales tax was just replacing the 3/8.
Right.
So,
The other option is, because you said we have a revenue bond that's about to go off. Revenue bond does not have to be tied to the specific project that you're building. Revenue bond means the city is good for its revenue. We've had no default. We are a good bet. We have a good rating. So if we did a revenue bond, this kind of $228,000 is a huge plus to sell the bond, because you're showing what you're building. You're not necessarily saying, I mean, nobody can expect the revenue from this is going to pay for itself. We didn't expect that when we built the water park, the water center. It was $1 million paid cash. We knew it wasn't going to pay for itself every year, but it was worth what we wanted for our citizens. Same thing with this. But you don't have to. So I'm just saying, if you had a revenue bond, you don't have to go to the public. You find a buyer on the market, and you just pay for it with your regular revenue, the way I understand revenue bonds. So you have to have a project that is going to be feasible to a buyer.
Well, and I will say this, so pros and cons. Yes, you're listing a lot of pros for the revenue bond, but they also have a lot of higher interest rate that you have to pay.
That's the other thing I was going to say, is this a bad time to do it? Yeah, because of the rates, yeah.
So if you do a tax bond, you can usually, your interest rate's way lower.
Yeah, especially because you're locked in. Yeah, no, I realize that.
Mayor, if I
Madam
may.
Mayor?
Yeah, Mayor, if I may, I'd make the recommendation to table this, and what we can do is bring it back to the board, and we can do we'll do a presentation, and we can have, just set aside an hour to discuss this, and let me get some answers for you, if that's okay, because we still have an agenda and a presentation.
I just have one quick comment just on the vote, because that is part of what you're looking into. I'm not opposed at all to presenting a vote, but I think we would have to be real careful how we word the question. I'm not sure even what the question would be, because I think if you just say, would you want this or not, they would say yes, but what does that mean? I mean, they'd have to understand what that meant. Does that mean that a sales tax dollar is going to be applied to it, or how much is it, and what does the sale? I mean, there would be a lot to the question, I would think. So those are
and
just
I think
things
that's something that Alan
Well,
was
you
talking
can look
about.
into
He's
all
going to
that.
get all
Okay,
of that
great.
and how it would
That-
work, and then bring it back to you all at a different board
Okay,
meeting. So it will not be on this next agenda. Is that correct? It
Correct.
will be
We'll
later
table
time.
that.
Okay.
And again, we could possibly do a survey also.
Then, Madam
Perfect.
Mayor, I just had one other comment. In terms of what I was saying to Travis, the interviewing of the key stakeholders, I only brought up JBU because I was surprised that was listed when we don't have all of our school system listed. I would think you would want to send interview surveys, whatever, to every one of our school kids' homes, so that the kids actually had an input on what they would want a rec center to be providing the parents or the kids or whatever, based upon the age. But I would think every school in our school system should be part of that list of key stakeholders, is what I'm saying. Not just the school as a whole, the school system, but each school. That's what I meant. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So Alan, you have that information. Okay, we'll move on from there, sir.
Great discussion, thank you. Moving on to contracts and approvals, F, is there any questions about the joint use agreement, Siloam Springs School District and the tennis courts for $135,000?
We've already talked about this, hadn't this already been?
Yes, I just want to make sure there's no questions going to pre-agenda, or going into the actual board meeting. And moving on to ordinances, are there any questions on ordinance G through N? If not, moving on to resolution. I'm sorry.
I did have a question on the one regarding short-term rentals, letter K. Why is it that we keep changing our code on, that's for Airbnbs, I believe, right?
Correct.
Short-term rentals. I think it's been brought up before that the worry is we're gonna have someone just buy up a whole, or buy a whole neighborhood or build a whole neighborhood just for Airbnbs, and therefore we should control it. I'm not in favor of just making changes to code because of the potential of something that doesn't sound very reasonable or very feasible that someone could do. And that seems to be what that is about. So,
Ben, do you have an answer for that?
Excuse me, Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. That was one of the suggestions from the model code that we used from Hot Springs to limit the number of short-term rentals by an entity. We can remove that or strike that from the ordinance if that's the pleasure of the board. But it was just one of many different regulations that the city was hoping to put forward to be considered for these types of uses.
We're limiting it to how many?
It was 2 per entity.
we're not Hot Springs, and we don't have anything compared to Hot Springs on tourism. So I don't think that it's something that we need to be worried about.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
is there any data that shows entities have bought up blocks anywhere? I mean, has that actually happened?
There's been one situation where an owner had an apartment or boarding house, and they used multiple rooms of that, basically making it into a hotel essentially. But each unit was an Airbnb, so that one might have been an issue. I would have to kind of dig into that more, but I don't think we've seen too many where there are a buyer that would just buy up many homes and then convert them all to short-term rentals. I think Megan wants to say something too.
Megan Thomas, Planner 1. I think we also added that in there mainly because we put a cap on it. I know that we have like 30 per year and we're nowhere near that cap yet, but we're still growing. Our housing is growing. And so we just wanted to keep one individual from basically using up all the short-term rentals in the city when we hit that cap, so that everyone else has the opportunity to have short-term rentals as well. And it's not just one business taking up all of the short-term rentals within the city.
And you have it at 2 per right now?
Two per entity, and our cap is 30 per year. So we are nowhere near that 30, but we're growing. So that's planning for the future, just to see where we end up at. If we ever end up like Fayetteville, where they have a lot of Airbnbs, I'm sure everyone knows about that, but just to make sure that a business doesn't come to Siloam and say that they want to buy up all of our housing and take up all of that stock for our short.
And then do 2 the next year. Is that right? Or are you saying 2, period, no matter how long?
The code says no more than 2 short-term rental permits or business license shall be approved to any individual applicant for short-term rentals. And
Doesn't say within a time period.
It does not say within time period, and that's included as an individual, entity, company, association, or corporation.
I remember when the lady showed up when we first were dealing with this from Fayetteville, and she had like 15 or 20, and it was stunning. That's her livelihood, and God bless her, but my goodness, I'd hate to have any of that here.
So my question is, do we have any individuals now that have more than 2? So what will happen? They are grandfathered in.
Yeah, the important thing to remember this ordinance is all existing short-term rentals are grandfathered in. So this is only affecting people that are coming in after this is approved. So I don't believe we have anyone that's multiples, but if there are, they're grandfathered in. They're not going to be affected.
Okay, I'm a little confused when you were talking about the home that had multiple rooms. Are those classified as short-term rentals? And if there's a house that's got 3 or 4 that they're using as short-term rental, that takes them out of that pool. They can only do 2. Is that what you're saying?
If it's entire unit being leased out, so not to be confused with a bed and breakfast. So if there was,
okay.
If there was a house and
Rooming house or whatever.
Those are not impacted. Those are separate. Those are different use unit. That would be a different model where you're renting out a room and then people will come into a common area or things like that. This is where you're renting out the entire house to an individual. That's not affected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Megan, you said right now there's a cap on 30.
The cap on 30 is part of this code amendment, and that's just planning for the future. Just right now, we're nowhere near that cap. And like I said, the restricting to 2 for entity, we haven't had that problem yet. But again, just planning for the future so we don't have to bring back another code amendment, a few years from now saying, hey, they're kind of taking up all of this.
So is there a cap right now?
There is not.
Okay. So, and I know it was in here. Do you know off the top of your head how many short-term rentals we have right now?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I think we've had like 14 last year.
Yeah, I think the most we've ever received in 1 year is 13, and that was the initial push when we first started regulating them, and of course they all came in because we were sending out letters to everyone we found out. But then since then it's really leveled off. We haven't had, you know, more than, I mean, this year I think we've only had what, 2 or 3 just in 2023. So it looks like we have 27 permits that have been issued so far. So
that would mean only 3 more people this year.
well, again, that's
Per year?
that's total that we've done so far. So in multiple years, it's gotten up to 27. So, you know, in one given year, you don't get up to more than 10 or 11. In a given year, you don't get up to more than 10 or 11.
Okay.
Yep.
So, but then supposedly they tell us that Siloam's going to double in size in the next 15 years. So then we might go well beyond that cap of 30 in the next 15 years. Or there might be people who want to go above. I'm just wondering if there even needs to be a cap at this point, if we're nowhere near meeting it. And if we're going to double in size, then our cap should be higher than 30.
It can certainly be adjusted if it becomes an issue. The reason for the cap, just to remind the board, is because this is to protect our housing stock. So we have a limited amount of housing available in the community, and anyone who's in the real estate industry understands that housing prices are going up. We're becoming less and less affordable because we're not able to build ourselves out of the problem. More people are coming here than houses that can be built. And so this is a tool to try to protect the houses that we do have from just being converted over to short-term rentals. Once it's a short-term rental, you can't use it as a residence. It's basically a motel room for the community. And so, you know, we don't want to have no regulation and you know, the numbers get higher and higher and higher, and that's more eroding of your housing stock. So that's the reason for the 30 cap.
Would this be reviewed on a yearly basis? How often do we review those regulations?
Just on an at-need basis. I would say that if we have a year where we do get over 30, you know, we'll look at it again and see if that's something that's a continued issue. But like I said, this is planning for growth. We're nowhere near that amount right now, so I don't imagine it'll be an issue for quite a number of years.
I would imagine that the number might be self-regulating, because if you get too many, then the people that have bought these houses for this purpose are not getting them rented.
And just to speak to that, because I know some citizens who have them, like one, for example, it was their family home and they want to save it and keep it, but they're adults. And so it's not a house they went out and bought for this purpose. It's one they want to keep in the family, and eventually, when their kids grow up or whatever, somebody would have it. So it's not necessarily people going out and buying them just for some income.
Not investors.
Right, yeah. It's important. The home's important to them, and they want to hang on to it.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
This has been talked about at the state level, and I want to remind people, and I'm one of them that have pushed our senators and our legislative, and I will continue pushing them, and I continue having conversations at the state level that they might make this ordinance where it doesn't matter, because that's private property and it's not ran as a business. And I think where this came from is we wanted to collect the tax from it, but then when we collect the tax, then we take and government puts their hands in it. And that was not my intent in bringing that into the city's attention. My intent was that we collect the revenue that we should collect, but I didn't mean to have government. I believe in limited government, and I do not believe in government overreach, and I believe this is one of those.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Are you done, Director Rooster? Okay. I looked up what you were talking about, because I remember hearing something about that, and it was a Senate bill.
And it's coming back.
Yeah, and apparently it failed due to some term that I'm not sure about, but what failed was not allowing cities to put any regulations on Airbnbs. Is that correct?
Right.
So
They
they
will
were,
not-
the bill was that cities could not put regulations on Airbnbs.
City and county.
Okay, but then it failed. But yeah, it was just all recent, so it could be brought back. But I did have a question of clarification. You're saying 30 is the cap for permits per year, but did I see something with an overall cap of 64?
That was in the previous.
That was
ordinance.
previously.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's scratched.
Gone away. Yeah, that
Okay.
was a percentage of the number of housing we had in the community, and you always keep it. You would update it once every 10 years.
Okay.
But this is a little bit simpler to manage, and it doesn't have an overall cap, so it's every year's 30 is allowed.
Okay, so
Yeah.
potentially in the next 5 years, if we got 30 a year, we would have more than 1% of the population. Okay.
Right.
Okay, but yeah, I would agree with what Director Rissler is saying. This may become a moot point at some point.
We don't regulate the number of rental units that somebody can have, do we?
I don't believe we can
Nope.
do that. No, this is not considered like a long-term rental because those
I
are.
understand that,
yeah,
but we
yeah.
don't regulate or limit the number of, like, apartment complexes or rental units is what I'm talking about.
One of the things to consider and the differences in that, Director, is the difference in the definition of the short-term rental and the long-term rental. Is a long-term rental is considered housing of people. So typically, local governments do not reach into anything regulating rentals that are long-term based off of the fact that you can get into fair housing issues.
Oh, I understand what the difference is, because I used to be in the apartment management, so I do understand. I'm just wondering, what is the legalities of limiting an owner of having the number of short-term rentals?
This underwent legal review, and I understand that cities do have ability to regulate in this area, the number of units per
The
year.
state has recognized that.
Many cities have done that. I think Fayetteville, Bella Vista. I mean, many of them
That's what you
have
guys were talking
caps or total numbers allowed, that type of thing. Yeah.
Now they can
Yeah.
regulate.
But in the future, it's being pushed by this, yeah. So,
Any other questions or any questions on any other ordinances? Moving on to resolutions, any questions about Resolution O? If not, we will move on to a presentation. Just want to let board know this presentation, I had a lot of really good questions from board members. This is something when I became the city administrator, looking at the protection of the quality of our water and the land that we own in Oklahoma. This is not something that anyone brought to me. This is something that I just feel strongly about, to just protect our water quality. No tort immunity. Chris will give a presentation. Actually, when I was at WOCA a few months ago, I had actually asked the staff there if they would ever be interested in talking about it. Please contact me. I was very impressed that Secretary McQueen was at my door with the mayor just a week or so later to discuss. In the meantime, I have talked to the Cherokee Nation, and I will have letters from the Chief of Staff and from the Attorney General. The Chief of Staff for the Chief, who was with him yesterday, they are not interested at all to purchase this land. They will partner with the state of Oklahoma. I'm not looking to sell the land to GRDA or anyone else. My thought is to sell it to the state of Oklahoma to protect our conservation and our water quality and to educate our children. But again, I don't want to take too much of Chris's
I know you're doing
thunder.
great.
But again, he was kind enough to leave a meeting and be here today just to answer questions, in case you have them.
Thank you, Mayor, and let me see if I can get this working. All right, so I just wanted to start out.
This is spelled right.
Yes, I double checked that. actually. So I just want to start out. Can you hear me now? I just want to start out by saying I'm Chris Paxton. I'm the Director of Community Development. I just want to start out by saying I finished this slideshow at 1 o'clock, so this is as fast as I could get it to you. So I appreciate the board's time on this, and I'll try to make this relatively painless for those in the audience that are not here for this item. So this is the Lake Francis lakebed property discussion. Today, I just wanted to give you a quick overview. We're going to go through the current status of this property, some of the liabilities associated with this property, some of the previous board discussions about this property, and we'll talk about some considerations. What I'm seeking today is some feedback from the board. Start out with this. The purpose of this presentation is to begin a conversation. It's not to provide exact totals or final amounts. There's boundaries that are shown in here. There's totals of acreage. There's valuations. These are all early estimates based on available data, and they are subject to change. So no actions are expected today as staff collects information and prepares additional information from the board to consider moving forward. One thing to note is our goal at this point is just to be transparent with this board and to obtain some feedback and improve some communication on this with the board. So I wanted to get it to you as early as possible. Start that feedback and that communication so we can have a discussion. So to kind of start things off, the original proposal, one of the previous proposals I should say, is from August the 30th, 2022. It was for approximately 339.1 acres and included one of the properties was portions of Section 17 in Oklahoma. You can see that in the top left image. Some of the property has since been removed per previous negotiations for removal of the dam property and to meet Arkansas Department of Health requirements for the intake buffer. There's a current proposal for these 4 properties, which consists now of approximately 317.18 acres of land. On that Section 17 property, there were 2 portions of that property, a 7.7 acre portion of that that the Arkansas Department of Health would like the city to preserve in order to have that intake buffer preservation, and then approximately 14.22 acres of dam property. If you look at that image right there, you can see the orange boundary. That orange boundary includes both the 7.7 acres, which is the intake buffer preservation, and it's also the 14.22 acre dam property. Overall, you can see that northern property that's in Section 17. This would be a representation of that property, excluding from the original proposal that 7.7 acres. So much of this property is currently in Zone A. It's a special flood hazard area. It's also designated as a wetland. You can see the general area in this image shows the Zone A designation along the Illinois River. So to kind of go into the conversation a little bit, there are some liabilities associated with this property. One of the things we looked at was risk. Risk is the potential for harm or financial loss. Start with the property. The city is also not immune from adverse possession actions for property in Oklahoma. The city has previously lost approximately 240 acres of land adjacent to these properties due to adverse possession, which is a loss of over approximately $500,000 in land. Water depth in areas on this property exceeds 18 feet in a 100-year flood event. It's likely that most of the property will be a regulatory floodway in the future. One of the things I showed you earlier was that this is a Zone A property. Zone A means that it hasn't had the depth of a flood study as a future study may show. During a future study, it would likely become a Zone AE. The E stands for engineered. A Zone A that engineered site would show you the location of any regulatory floodway. The majority of this area is also inundated greater than 5 feet in depth in floodwater during a flood event. You can see in the right in the top, 18.8 feet is the estimated 1% flood depth that was taken at a point, I believe it's that point that is shown in the image. It kind of shows the flood depth at that location. The red in the bottom right photo shows any area that is estimated to have at least or greater than 5 feet of flood depth in the future for a special flood event. Previously, there were discussions of the possibility of a residential development on, for example, stilts or some sort of elevated structure. This type of development is typically along lakes for being on stilts. However, the flooding type along this area is now riverine flooding. High riverine flooding flows rapidly. It also has debris and stuff that's in the water. It's a much more dangerous flood water. Unlike area flooding around lake properties, and elevated home development is less feasible in this type of a flooding area. So just to kind of capture that, riverine flooding tends to have more force and debris within the floodwaters. You can see an example of that in the top right. Area flooding or inland flooding is when the water rises from a source such as a lake and sometimes along rivers. Those rising elevations cover a larger area. Homes on stilts are more common along areas prone to area flooding rather than the close proximity to riverine flooding. Additionally, since this area is not in our jurisdiction, we can't provide the same quality of police protection as properties within our jurisdiction limits. We rely on Adair County for any actions at this site. Some of the previous discussions that the board may remember, so I believe some of the board members here today were on the board with some of these discussions. One of the concerns was the price per acre. Previous discussions were discussed at $1,106 per acre. The previous concerns also included the Arkansas Department of Health should be consulted regarding the sale of the property within the buffer zone. Also, that the Cherokee Nation should be asked if they are interested in purchasing the property. And also that the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment should be consulted to request a smaller purchase or a conservation easement instead of a fee title. With this current discussion, what we're wanting to bring to the board for the feedback and to start this conversation and get some communication, get some feedback for is that the current price offered is $2,250 per acre. This is over double the previous offer, and it aligns with recent land sale of an adjacent property. With this, the city would retain the buffer area, and the Cherokee Nation, we did reach out to them, and while they would partner for improvements in this with this property, they're not interested in owning the land at this time. Staff recommends selling this to the state of Oklahoma with fee simple, with potentially having deed restrictions associated with that. Some of the considerations whenever we start this conversation is that the benefit to the city of Siloam Springs on this land is the conservation of its natural resources, water quality for the city of Siloam Springs intake, and improved waters for the Illinois River watershed. With the sale to the state of Oklahoma, their focus is on conservation of the natural resources, water quality improvements for the Illinois River watershed, and the use of the property for studies and for educational purposes. And just to show a little bit closer where that 7.7 acre of land is with the for the buffer zone for the intake, that is demonstrated here. Approximate boundaries are in this orange box on the right. And with that, we would just be looking for feedback from the board today. We also thank the Secretary of Energy for being present, and stand for any questions, along with some of our staff is here that has been following this through the years. So if you have any questions, then we can do our best to give you some sort of a response.
Madam Mayor. On January 17th, we had a presentation by the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust about doing a conservation easement. Was that taken into consideration since we've already discussed that as an option? Where does that fall in things?
Director, are you talking about making it an easement a conservation easement before we sell it?
Yes, it was there was a presentation. Northwest Arkansas Land Trust came.
Yes, ma'am. We looked at the numbers on that. We're looking at a cost between $23,000 and $30,000 to do that but selling it directly to Oklahoma, that would be included in the deed, and they would do that, and we would not be saddled with that cost.
Because I don't think at the time there was talk of selling it, but I could be misremembering.
I think, Kevin, if I'm correct, but to make it into a conservation easement, it would cost the city at that time $23,000, and that's been a year or so. So I'm adding a little bit of money, say 23 to 30, but the cost that I remember was $23,000.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Carol, and then I will come to you, Lisa. Carol?
This has been an ongoing conversation for 20 years, at least, that I'm aware of. And I know at the beginning of that 20 years, I think we did lose some of that property because we did not, we just weren't watching it. And I'm not sure how we can watch all of that now. Are you looking for what we want to do with that? Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure what you're wanting from us.
So yes, I think what we're looking for is where, does the board want us to move forward with a sale? Do we just want that conversation? The board's wanting us to be more transparent and provide the communication. This is us getting it as early as possible. I finished this at 1 o'clock today. So this is us getting it to you as early as possible to get it in front of you so you can provide that feedback. What is your direction? What is your guidance for this type of land sale? Is it something that you want us to pursue? As previous discussions had?
If I may, board, to be totally transparent with you, I would like to bring this to you in the next month or so for sale to the state of Oklahoma. We have people sitting on that property right now that are getting ready to, I'm not saying they're getting ready to, but they've been there long enough that we could be facing a battle for them taking possession of this property and us losing this property again.
I do understand that, and I think it's time that we do take some action so that we don't lose that. I'm not sure what the answer is.
And I think one of the things to kind of take into consideration is that with an adverse possession case, if you sometimes taking an action to remove someone can cause the adverse impact, which brings it to them to the courtroom to take that property from you.
Brings it to the forefront.
That's correct. If you have, there's nothing we can do from our side to stop an adverse impact or an adverse possession. However, if this property was owned by the state of Oklahoma, it would be protected by Oklahoma law.
My concern also is the property we could lose is next to our water intake. Our quality of water should be our #1 priority, not just for our children, but our children's children. And going forward, we have to protect that. And kind of put you on the spot, Mr. Secretary, I don't think the state of Oklahoma would be up against the adverse possession. Once they own it, it's there and it's recorded in the deed or however we sell it as a conservation easement.
If I could add one point as well to Director Blair's question about the conservation easement, the real benefit to selling the land to Oklahoma, with a conservation easement, we're essentially funding any future kind of legal action that may come against the land. But by selling it to the state of Oklahoma, they're the ones that are best suited to improve this land and improve the water quality in the region. Because I believe we would find it difficult to do some of the things they're wanting to do, like wetland preservation and things like that for the Illinois River watershed with our ownership of that land. So again, the conservation easement would simply be to retain it as is when there's a benefit to the city and the region as a whole for selling it to the state of Oklahoma. Because the only reason we own that land, the benefit that it provides to us today is the water quality for the intake. And they would be the ones best suited to carry that forward into the future.
So if we used to sell that land and do a contract, is a contract for the whole 317 to be to have the easement on all the land? 100% of the land that was sold?
That
conservation
would be
easement on 100% of the land that is sold?
not a conservation easement. It would be a sale of the land with
Well, you're
restrictions
saying
that
if you
would
sell the
prevent
land,
development.
that you're saying Oklahoma will put a conservation easement. There's a value to a conservation easement because a conservation easement will not let squatters on there because there's maintenance of that land. And so it's not possible.
Correct.
So-
That's something we could work into the contract, I believe. I can't speak to their future intent other than their willingness and their desire to improve that area. And they do own the portion that was claimed against the city, the 259 acres that we've already lost. They've made that purchase. And I think Secretary would like to add to that.
Secretary McQueen, yes, if you would, please, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Directors and Administrator Gilbert. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Our intent really is to improve water quality up and down the Illinois River. I'm going to refer to it as our river, not your river or our river. It's really a shared resource between residents of Arkansas and Oklahoma. And as we look to the future, water quality is going to be more important with all of the growth that's taking place here in northwest Arkansas, and that growth is now moving into eastern Oklahoma. So we want to do everything that we can do to protect the water quality, and one of the best ways of protecting water quality is to providing wetlands adjacent to our waterways, improvement of the riparian environment. As we look at our rivers and streams across all of Oklahoma, what we find in particular with the Illinois River watershed is that the associated wetlands are only 50% of what we see on average across our state. So as we look at ways to improve the watershed here on the Illinois River, we are already starting from a deficient spot compared to our other rivers with the number of wetlands that we need. So our intent here, and let me share you some personal perspectives, because cabinet secretaries, just like directors, have particular personal views. And my personal view on protecting the Illinois River is that we need to take a long-term view. So in the past, some of my predecessors have negotiated conservation easements for particular tracts along the Illinois River. My issue with conservation easements is typically they are for fixed terms. Typically 20 or 30 years is what are traditionally negotiated. Our interest in purchasing this property is that we don't have to put a conservation easement there because we own the property, and we can guarantee through that ownership that it's held for conservation purposes in perpetuity. So that's why we would like to own the property, because we see this as our first and best opportunity to provide a long-term solution to preserving a very important wetland along the Illinois River. My hopes are that we can use this as a model as we move down the river, identify other parcels that could be bought and not put in a conservation easement, but bought so that they're owned in perpetuity for the protection of the river.
And you want to do it for all the land that's being purchased, or are you just going to do it along the river banks?
No, we'll put the entire area, because the entire area is basically a wetland, and it really needs to be
Preserved.
exactly. Its best use is as a wetland, so that's why we're interested in it. It's a unique educational opportunity too. There are not a lot of places in the U.S. where you have a start from zero opportunity to look at a successional wetland development, and that's what we're seeing there. We're now 30 years into a first succession forest on the wetlands. To get back to what that area looked like in 1920 before Lake Francis was built is probably going to be 200 or 250 years, because we'll see the more traditional trees like oaks and walnuts growing there in the wetlands as the wetlands mature back to what nature originally intended. But our intent there is for perpetual protection of that wetland.
So when you get a conservation easement, it doesn't allow it prevents people from building on it that you don't want it to build. Is what you're offering the same thing, that you can't just go in there and put a bunch of buildings in there and say, oh, it falls under our, because that's not protecting the land. If you're putting a lot of hard surfaces on it and houses and buildings, that kind of goes against land protection and land
We have absolutely no interest in putting buildings on that property, because as was shown on the overheads, that area all floods. I've lived the last 45 years in the city of Tulsa, and over there we've spent, honestly, a small fortune since 1986 of buying up properties, homes that were originally built in the floodplain and subsequently flooded. So what I want to do is be proactive here, and through the ownership in perpetuity of this property is guarantee that there'll be no permanent buildings on the property. Now, what I can see is opportunities in addition to education for recreational enhancement. So perhaps trails through the wetlands, a place to pick out the canoe and go around the dam and put in below the water park. I think there's some opportunities like that. But as far as permanent buildings being built on the wetlands, that's just a terrible idea.
Well, and that would be part of the contract of selling the land, that's what will be done with the land.
We're certainly open to discuss that, but what I'm telling you is the rational use for that land, the best use of that land is for a wetland protection.
But we've seen people sell property and build on it that shouldn't have been built on. Just like you said, the city of Tulsa has had to buy a lot of property. And a lot of us have grown up in this area, and we swam in that area, and we have found arrowheads in that area. This is a part of who we are today. And land is a valuable resource right now. And to think that it could just be, you can say it today, but tomorrow, if you and I aren't here, is somebody going to take it away from our children and our grandchildren? That's important to me.
Well, I think there's additional protections too, because it resides in a designated FEMA floodplain area too. So beyond just our ownership, I think there are other protections that exist there to keep it from being developed.
I'd like to see it in the contract before we sell.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, David,
I don't-
let's go to
who's-
Mindy, and then I'm coming to you.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, I was just going to say, I think I remember that one of the reasons why we had the land trust company come in and look at doing a conservation easement was actually, apart from selling it, it was actually to protect it even from our own selves in the future. So I just, to be transparent, I think there was a concern that there just always be some sort of verbiage that states that nothing will ever be done, whoever has it. And at that time, we weren't even considering selling it. So just so you're aware of that.
Thank you.
David?
Secretary McQueen, thank you for being here today. If I'd known that this was the plan, we probably would have asked you to go first. Ed Fight can sit in the back for several hours. We don't care. But for you, sir, we should have had you go first. And I apologize we didn't bring that up. But I think part of the, I don't know what to call it, bad taste in your mouth that has been seen by our city board is the land that was taken by adverse possession. And as Director Smiley said, it has a couple decades ago first started, and when you're just blown away that this has never happened before, we were a little surprised, but found there was nothing we could do. But recently, in the last few years, to find out that land has since sold to GRDA, the question of the board is like, well, why shouldn't we just sell to GRDA instead of giving it to the land trust or whoever? I think that this is a great idea for the state to buy it, because you do have a much bigger platform to be able to fight anything that may go on top or try to take it. And as Lisa was concerned, we could put anything in the contract we wish in that, in perpetuity, that it stay preserved as is. I mean, that we're not gonna see in 50 years, the state of Oklahoma put a water park. You know, there is, as she said, arrowheads, there's lots of conservation from the state with tribal lands and everything else of trying to preserve as much as possible. The fact it is wetlands, I can tell you, when I was mayor, we had the Illinois River in Arkansas. People had built down right on the banks, and it flooded up to here in their homes. And as we saw Chris present, these are not just slow water, these were rushing waters. Governor Beebe came in, toured the houses, and it was horrendous what these people had to go through. So it's not something that people just, and the people that already lived out there had said, you better not build down there, but they did. And so with the state owning it, it couldn't happen. And I think that's a wise move. The thing that I had a question here, if you guys bought it, you guys meaning state of Oklahoma, if you bought it, would you intend to turn around and sell it to GRDA?
No, we'll hold it under the state of Oklahoma title.
Okay. Because that would be a concern that my desire would be that it stay with the state. The only qualm I have is that we as a city, the state of Oklahoma has not always looked out for the city of Siloam's best interest, especially when we had the AG Edmondson, I think, was the one with all the farms, the chicken farms in the city and our quality of water and everything. But I think in terms of where you're coming from, it's totally different bailiwick, totally different purpose, and I think we could work with the state of Oklahoma, just because your goals are aligned with our goals, and I think it would be a good thing.
Madam Mayor?
Betsy.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, my biggest concern would just be that, like they said, when you and I are gone, that it still be used, that it still be conserved. So I would be good with it as long as there's something we can work out that it stays that way. Other thing, Chris, would you send the board your presentation when you get a chance, please? Would you email it? Okay, thank you.
Does anyone know how the city got all this property? Was it given to us when the Lake Francis was given to the city? I don't know. Ed Veit is a historical. Does anyone know?
I don't know if Ed May or staff.
I just know we've talked about how much we own, and it was originally the city's best interest because of our water source. Of course, long before that, City Lake north of town was the city's water source. But when it became the flowing Illinois River, somehow we either bought it or were deeded the land. And I seem to think we were deeded the land, but I don't know that for
Ed,
sure.
do you happen to know? You're our historian.
Ed, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you probably know.
Mr. Sloan built the Lake Francis
Right.
originally, and opened up, and then there was a flood, came along and washed out a portion of the earthen dike. We were at World War II then. He built the lake in the late 20s. We were at World War II, and the lake sat there idled for roughly 13, 14 years. And in 1954, the city of Siloam Springs purchased the lake,
Actually
I
bought
believe, for $25,000. And at that point, they repaired the dam in 1955, and it's been your water source since then.
Now,
The dam failed in May of 1990,
Yeah.
and the top of the main spillway came off. There had been concerns about the safety of the dam prior to that, and the city made a decision at that point to reduce the size of the lake to less than 50 surface acres to get away from the state of Oklahoma's dam safety requirements. And you started a run-of-the-river withdrawal, and you built the off-stream storage facility to the southwest of the city. At that point, started using that for your raw water supply.
So when we bought it from Mr. Sloan, is that when we got all this other acreage, or did the other acreage come later as a buffer, or Or do
You ended up at the lake, and at some point the Langley family was involved, and they leased their portion of the land that was impacted by the inundation for a very minimal amount of money each year, or for perpetuity, as long as to the water's edge. And when the dam was reduced, that's what brought about the litigation in Adair County, was that the water had moved back to the river channel, and that's when the prolonged, protracted litigation occurred. And you lost 259.67 acres. And to clarify, you've known me a long time. I worked for the Scenic Rivers Commission for 33 years, and have been in and out of this room and the old building over here many, many times, and worked with Moose Van Pook and others. But the goal has been to ensure that the city had water supply all of my career. I can throw pictures up like Mr. Paxton did when I was a young man and had hair on my head and was skinny and so forth, but I've been dealing with this issue for well over 40 years. And this is a win-win deal for the city. It takes away your costs, it puts money back in your pocket from the involvement that you've been in the water park south of town and stabilizing the lake dam down there. It also hopefully mitigates some of the issues that you've had to deal with over time. But Secretary McQueen echoes exactly what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking long term. And I'm just going to say this just for a second, if I may have a little latitude. When I started appearing over here at the city of Siloam Springs, there were 180,000 people in the entire watershed. And if you divide up 1.1 million acres, that's 6 acres per person if everybody's equal. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and in 1992, the federal court ruled on the Fayetteville case. At that time, in 9 years, we'd seen the population grow in such a manner that we saw the land mass per person drop from 6 acres to 4.4 acres. Today, it's at 1.5 acres. And if the demographers are correct, we'll be somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 million by 2045. And that means that everybody that lives in the watershed, if they're equal, will have less than 1 acre of land. It's crucial that everybody partner to try to protect what's happening south of town here. There's a lot of talk about that whitewater park down there, but that whitewater park is actually a good opportunity to, I talk about a three-legged stool, putting a three-legged stool underwater. Take our water and put it on that three-legged stool. One of the legs is economic development. The second leg is good environment. And the third leg, to your point, about quality of life. When people get off work in Siloam Springs in 20 years, are they going to be able to walk out here on these wonderful trails? Are they going to be able to ride a bicycle, whatever? Hopefully what you're doing today is not only providing good water, but you're also providing opportunities that when those people get off at 5 o'clock in the evening, they have water bodies around here that they can go and walk around, but they can also look at that water body and say, it's an educational tool, but more importantly, that's my drinking water. And we did a flood study with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the flood study came back with mixed results, but the long and short of it is that we need many of these proposals that are on the table today. As Northwest Arkansas grows, Chris is a certified floodplain manager like myself. Our streams are filled up with silt and gravel right now because of the rainfall events and development that's going on. We don't have the capacity in our streams anymore to assimilate some of these rainfall events. And so now we're seeing neighborhoods that historically have never flooded or flooding and so forth. So we need to, this will also work as a detention facility. River comes up, it'll store a little bit of water, release it slowly back to the environment, take away some of the erosion, the power that's in that water. Water is powerful, it's relentless, and it causes a lot of damage when it's out of its banks. And so, anyway, give it a lot of thought, ask it a lot of questions of your staff. Secretary McQueen is committed to this project, and I would hope that you'd invite him back. And I know that I have a history that's up and down with this city, but throughout my entire career, my goal has been to help this community. And Moose Van Pook taught me a lot. And if you haven't ever been around him, go eat an ice cream cone with yourselves and talk about some of the issues. You'd be surprised what Moose Van Pook's ice cream cone did for me and for this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Hey, Ed, just to tell you, our city owes you a massive debt. You have been an ally to the city of Siloam for decades, and we appreciate it very much. And we appreciate what GRDA and yourself have done to partner for this WOCA. That is a big, big feather in the cap of Northeast Oklahoma, Northwest Arkansas. And you've been a big part of that too, so.
Well, the rationale across the landscape is let's dewater the dams, let's take them out. And there have been many, many dams have been removed, but the way that this project ended up at Lake Francis is a win-win deal for this community. And the trails that are going to connect it to our community up here, and I share the same sentiment as the Secretary. It's our river. It's not Oklahoma, it's not Arkansas, it's ours. And those that live in the watershed, those people that work in the watershed, and those people that visit the watershed need to respect the fact that water's important. And without water,
oh yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Our Mayor Judy has seen you at these meetings. Carol has seen you. I've seen you, and you've been here. I don't even know how many times to help the city of Siloam, to either solve a problem or to educate us, and we owe you.
I would
We'll
like to
appreciate
take
it.
this opportunity to thank you for your commitment as well, because you have been here many times.
Well, your city's been good to us, so this has been a partnership.
It has to be.
It's been a partnership. I know for many years I taught Swiftwater Rescue, and your fire service were the first ones that wanted to go through the program with Bill Humphrey and myself. And I mean, when we have trouble with floods, we know that you're one of the derrick stones we can rely on for when things are hard. So thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Secretary McQueen.
Madam Mayor, in closing, I'd just like to say we've had the opportunity to brief your staff on the project. We appreciate the opportunity to brief you today on the project. The water quality in the Illinois River is a priority for us as a state. Personally, it's a priority for me. I've enjoyed the recreational aspects of the Illinois River for the last 45 years. I look forward to my children and grandchildren doing that for many years to come. I am available anytime that you need information, so if we can be of help in any way whatsoever, please don't hesitate to call us. We'll be here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Alan?
Again, just to close, thank Chris for the presentation. Special thanks, Mr. Fight and the Secretary. It has been my privilege to work with him the past few weeks, and his professionalism. He's quiet when he has something to say. It's very important, so I've learned a lot, and I appreciate that. And I hope the board understands my whole goal is to protect the city, liability, protect our water for our children, grandchildren, their grandchildren, and I just think this is the smartest thing to do going forward. So we will continue to work. I will continue to keep the board apprised of everything that's going on, and as we discuss going forward, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussion. So we'll both be here for a little while afterwards if you have questions. But Mayor, I think that's all I have.
All right, sir.
Sorry I kept you later than normal today.
I think everyone is fine with that. We have some good information, good discussion today. So, and again, thank you, Ed, and thank you, Secretary, for being here. We appreciate it very much. Staff, thank you for being here and for your input and information for this board. And with that, if there was no other questions from the directors, we are adjourned.